back to the Independent Thinking online children's authors book festival thing that we're doing in partnership with Sue Atkins, the Sue Atkins Book Club, which gives us a chance to speak to all sorts of amazing authors, covering all sorts of different sorts of books, from storybooks for the very young to tales for older children, to books not only for children but about children. Which in so many ways is what we're going to be talking about now with Elaine Halligan and her book. And normally I'm waving a copy of the book, but all I've got is at the moment is a PDF. So Elaine will have to wave something if she gets the chance. Published by our friends to Independent Thinking at Crown House, who published the Independent Thinking Press book. And her book is entitled My Child's Different. And I'd like Elaine to introduce herself, and then just to tell us a little bit about her background and how she came to be writing a book with that title, and whether that title is an exclamation or a question or a plea or an excuse, or what tone of voice we should be reading that title, My Child's Different, in. Elaine, welcome to the book festival.
Thank you so much. And maybe I should flash a copy of my book, since it
there we go. Please do. Thank you. There we go.
There you go, since it never quite got to you over in Holland. Yeah, thanks so much for the introduction. Yeah, I'm a mum, and I'm not Super Nanny, and I'm not Mary Poppins. I'm a mum who's been at the coalface. And I wrote my book, My Child's Different, because it just described everything I was going through. And the story is that, gosh, it's 25 years ago now, Ian. I have to kind of pinch myself when I think I've got 2 adult children. But when I first came into parenthood, motherhood, I found it completely exhausting. I found it bewildering. I found it confusing. I didn't understand my son's behavior. I didn't understand how to manage him. And I kind of resorted to doing all the things as a parent that we do that just didn't work. I nagged. Yeah, who doesn't nag their children? I repeated. I cajoled. I guess I bribed. And eventually I ended up kind of not recognizing myself. Having been quite calm as a person in my kind of work life, I kind of turned into a screaming banshee. And I just thought, this is not right. But I was really struggling to parent Sam. And the funny thing is, Ian, and as a dad, you'll probably recognize this, is that I kind of sensed that something was different about Sam. But everyone would tell me the same story, which is, oh, he's just a boy. Yeah. You know, my son was like that when he was young, and he'll grow out of it. And don't worry. It's a crazy thing to say, don't worry. But I was really worried. And the kind of warning bells started really early on at nursery school. And I'd been met at the nursery school gate by the teacher with a kind of report card. And I was kind of thinking, how can a 3-year-old have a report card already? And I was told, Mrs. Halligan, and it was always the royal we, we've had a bad day. Your son's not sitting on circle time. He doesn't listen to instructions. He actually pushes other children, and he's quite aggressive. And one day I remember standing at the door with other parents listening in, and her saying that, you know, he'd been aggressive to one of the support assistants who was pregnant, and that she was very fearful of being in the same room as him. And as a mum, I just thought, what is happening here? And I just sensed that Sam was misunderstood, because at home, funny enough, we weren't seeing the same behavior. We were managing him better at home, I think, than at school. And to cut a long story short, it took us many, many, many years to firstly understand, I would guess, say, Sam's temperament. And we started to realize he was a very emotional boy, very intense and very sensitive. And most people didn't get that sensitivity. And he was also very impulsive. So he'd go from 0 to 100 without stopping. He just couldn't self-regulate. And the story is that when he started his first school, he was asked to leave very quickly. And after 3 schools and 3 school exclusions, at the age of 7, our beautiful blonde, blue-eyed boy had literally been written off in society. And that's the story that led me to writing the book.
Your book is exhausting because you're on such a journey. I mean, you do it in sort of chronological order. Here's the nursery, here's the first primary, here's out of school, here's back into school, here's the secondary school. And you are relentlessly faced with the challenges, the sort of the threefold challenge is what came across. The challenge of his behaviour, for whatever reason, whatever is behind that, we'll look at that. The reaction of the schools, trying to help the schools help you, trying to deal with what the schools were doing, thinking they were either helping or punishing or responding how they thought was the right way. And then also just dealing with it as a mother, as a human being as well. And it's not exactly a harrowing read, but it is it's a tiring read, because it's just one thing after another. That's what comes across. Does that sort of describe your understanding of what people get from the book?
I think it's an emotional roller coaster, but I really hope in those early chapters you did have a few laughs as well.
It's a human book. There's a humanity there, and there is
because I can look back now and see some of the incidents were, at the time absolutely harrowing, but I look back now and have a little chuckle. And one of the funniest incidents was when Sam was 5 and he was at a school in Wimbledon, and I don't know whether anyone knows Southwest London, but there's a school just off the A3, which is the busiest road, heading into Surrey. And at one of these schools, they had a beautiful farmyard, and there was a duck and I think a pig and a goat and some hens. And one day Sam arrived at school thinking, these guys shouldn't be living in the farmyard. They should be living back on Wimbledon Common. And so he waited for everyone to go into the school. And he had great intentions, I think. It was, he was thinking about organic farming. These guys shouldn't be penned up. They should be living on Wimbledon Common. And he opened the farmyard gate, except the animals didn't go to the common. They digressed all the way down to the busiest arterial road, the A3, and caused traffic chaos on that day. So yeah, I really hope it wasn't so harrowing and you could see the light moments, but you're absolutely right. It's confusing when you've got a child who's different. You firstly need to understand what it is you're dealing with and start to accept the child you've got and not the child you want them to be. So you're absolutely right. That's the first thing. The second thing is you've got to kind of work your way through an education system that's just not designed for neurodiversity. So we just want to take a square peg and stick it into a square hole. And if you are a circle, oh my goodness, there are problems. And there were problems both in the private sector, the state sector, and when Sam arrived at his third school, which was a special needs school and only lasted 10 weeks, absolutely, I understand why you say harrowing. Because literally, as a parent with a child who has been thrown out of 3 schools and a child who couldn't be educated, there's a lot of judgment in society because we don't understand difference and we're not very good at it. And I think our education system, and I'm not having a pop at teachers, goodness me, teachers have had the most exhausting journey. And I think we do live in a society where teachers aren't respected enough, but they're also constrained by an education system that really doesn't cater for children who are non-traditional learners. And that's what we had. Age 7, we suddenly started to realize that Sam had some specific learning issues. And I would say getting the referral to CAMS, the Child, Adolescent and Mental Health Service, was helpful in a way because we then managed to get what was then the Statement of Special Educational Needs, which is now the EHCP plan. But actually we were left with a kind of melting pot of what I call TLAs, which are 3-letter abbreviations.
Yeah.
And I'll test you here. I don't know whether you know any of these, but ASC. So it was the autistic spectrum condition. And I often thought, I'm just not sure about the diagnosis.
It's a disorder. It's a condition now, is it? They've upgraded it.
Well, you can't use disorder. No. Yeah. That's got negative connotations. It's got to be condition.
Okay.
And then I was told, actually, we think he's got something called ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder.
Just says no when he should be saying.
Just says no. Yeah. And then you've got the UK system saying, actually, we believe it's PDA.
Which is?
Well, it's not public displays of affection. It's pathological demand avoidance. It's a subset of autistic spectrum condition. And yeah, we had a child who was pathologically avoiding the classroom. Why? Because he was anxious. Every day at school was anxiety inducing and stress related, and he was just adopting whatever strategy he could to get out of there.
And literally get out. There's quite a few instances where he's just been found or he just wanders off.
Well, one day he was found locked in a cupboard for 3 or 4 hours. That was his way to avoid the stressful classroom situation. And he was reported missing to the police. But after 4 hours, after hearing everyone running around the school looking for him, he burst out of this cupboard declaring, I'm here, it's all right. And then, at one of the other schools, he was found walking all the way from Surrey back to Wimbledon because he just couldn't face the environment. And so change for him was a big deal. And so at the age of 7, we were faced with this kind of alphabet kid. But we were told he's got autistic spectrum, he's got dyslexia, he's got dyspraxia, which is now DDC, developmental coordination disorder. We were told he's got pragmatic semantic language. And I just at one point just said, enough. I just sensed that I had a rock covered in mud, and that it was my husband's job and I to peel back the mud, because I sensed that we had something extraordinary underneath, but that society just didn't understand him, his needs, or the way he learns. And interestingly, from a very early age, we allowed him to watch television. And I know screens, gosh, we could have a whole conversation about screens, but screens are not the kind of negative connotation for everyone. He has learned everything to do with classic cars by watching these programs on, I don't even know, Discovery Channel, I think, or Amazon Prime or something.
Along with all the taxis that he went to various schools in, that was a feature as well. That was a big thing.
So cars, it became his passion, but he learned differently. And understanding what his learning needs were. And actually it turned out at the end of the day that he wasn't autistic, he had ADHD and he had severe dyslexia, which means that his dyslexia was so severe, he's never written an exam in his life. And this is a young man who eventually ended up going to university and doing I've got to be careful, he's going to kill me if I get the degree wrong. Real estate, that was it, real estate. He did real estate, property degree, and actually never sat an exam because he always had a reader and a scribe.
Okay.
And he now runs some pretty big businesses as an entrepreneur in the classic car area. And he copes because we live in a society now where actually, if you do have learning difficulties, there's all sorts of tools and tricks and strategies that you can use. So actually, we don't have to be a traditional learner. There are other ways to learn, whether it's via the screens, whether it's audio, whether it's appropriate, all sorts of different ways of learning. And Sam's kind of accessed them all, and speech recognition and the software you get now. He's never been in a better place, I think, or dyslexics have never been in a better place to still manage and coping with everyday life.
No, that's incredibly powerful, and that they survive the school system and it's when they leave the school system that they start to flourish and find out who they are and realize that it constrained them, the system. And like we said, we're not attacking teachers, it's the system that's narrow, that says, we measure you by your exam results, we measure you by your behavior, whether you do what you're told. We have all these narrow measurements, and then if they survive that, they get out into the bigger world and realize that actually there are different criteria, there are different ways of working, they can find themselves. It's great to see. I've seen that in so many people, including my own daughter with her dyslexia, not as extreme as your son, but just she's found herself. But it was despite school, not because of the systems, not because of what was going on.
Sorry.
No, you go.
I was going to say, I think children will unlock their potential, but they do need a caring adult in their life. And actually everything stems from relationship quality at home, which is why I do the work. Schools can only do so much. If as long as there's one caring adult in the child's life who believes in them, who can build up their self-esteem, who can help them be emotionally intelligent, then they will kind of unlock their own potential. So it is a bit of a jigsaw puzzle in terms of getting the education provision right, in terms of getting whatever therapies or extra interventions they may need right. But actually, I think the biggest piece of the jigsaw puzzle stems from kind of what's happening in the home, the language that is being used, the modeling that's going on, and just being really warm and empathetic, but also firm when it matters. And it's about that wonderful balance of being positive, but being firm and also trying to be consistent.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, there's a quote from Maya Angelou. You talk about love recognizes no barriers, and that comes through. I talk about being relentless and difficult read in many ways, but the love from you to him, and reciprocally as well, it comes through, and through that there are things that we can overcome. And we know from a neurological point of view how important love is. In one of the other conversations I had earlier today about one of our associates in independent thinking is a consultant pediatric neurologist, Dr. Andrew Cohen, who talks about the need of love. The child's brain needs to feel love, experience that unconditional positive regard, and that child has a chance then of developing, regardless of whatever other things are going on in that child's brain. That child will be supported appropriately, and that comes across really strongly. What do you wish, bearing in mind that the audience for this could well be teachers who really want to help, who really want to do something, but you know, your son's a challenge. Your son was a challenge in a classroom, 30 kids. They've got to try and they've got to hit their own targets and standards and SAT results and Ofsted and everything. What advice, looking back now, would you give to teachers? What do you wish they would have done? What were you glad they did do at the time?
Gosh, that's such a big question.
Yeah, I know. And you got 5 minutes.
Yeah, so what I'm going to say, I think we need to invest far more money in teacher training and just in awareness in learning difficulties and how they present. That's point number one. And point number two, whenever there is an issue in the classroom, all behavior has a cause. And the mantra I would really strongly urge all teachers to say is that, is this child being a problem or are they having a problem? And that is really critical because most children will not behave badly in the classroom to manipulate you or to cause disruption. There is always something underneath their behavior, and it's always emotions and feelings. So it's about, and we can't do this without training. We need more training. We need more investment. We need more understanding. And the third thing I would say is, you know, the traditional system of discipline in a school, and I'm generalizing, so please forgive me if this causes offense to any teachers listening. Generally, the traditional method of discipline is kind of detentions. And all I can say is if detentions work, then why on earth would the same pupils be in detention over and over again? And actually, there's a bit in my book where Sam comes home talking about a detention he's on and just arguing with the teacher what a waste of time it is. And he comes up with something much more relevant and much more meaningful.
Do you want to read that little bit for us? Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the extract from my book is from the chapter when he gets to secondary school, and it's called Revealing the Diamond. So within the first half term, Sam had been given several detentions. Yet somehow he'd always managed to talk his way out of them. I never could comprehend how he did this. He just seemed somehow to be able to convince people of the injustice of it all. He also had a great respect for the head teacher, who was then Barry Huggett, OBE, who was very supportive and had no intention of giving up on Sam so early. Sam recalls, "Hey, Mr. Huggett, he's an amazing guy. He's an omnipresence, yet very quiet and introverted. He could say 1,000 words with just one look. In fact, he rarely talked to anyone one-to-one except in his office. He's a man of structure, driven and determined, and it was always clear he devoted his life to education, and he cared deeply about us and our futures. He's a very cool guy." Anyway, one day, Sam came home angry one evening, having been given a caution. He'd been found peeling paint off the old desks in the science room. He marched through the door and he threw his bag on the floor and he muttered, "I did confess. I confessed it when the teacher asked me about it. I didn't say sorry though, because the paint was peeling. I couldn't help but pick it, Mum. You know that thing?" I saw his point. "And I told the teacher the desks are really unsuitable for us." So how do you mean?" I asked. "Well, they're designed for practical science work, Mum, not for sitting and doing written work. They've been modified poorly, they've been painted really badly, and they're not suitable for anyone over 5 foot tall, especially those of us with sensory spatial awareness issues. He was right. Ergonomically, these desks were a disaster waiting to happen. Mum, how can we be expected to concentrate properly when we are forced to sit in such a restricted position? Look, I didn't mean to pick the paint off. I didn't mean to damage the desk. Actually, I didn't even realize I was doing it. I was just distracted. Anyway, I did try and explain this all to the teacher, but she wasn't listening. She just didn't get it. So I swore at her. Swearing aside, this was a very clear and reasoned argument, and I confess I was just a little bit impressed, because it was one of my first glimpses into how Sam's mind worked, and the logic and the rational thinking that was now becoming a bit of a signature trait. He then coherently explained that by being put on detention would be a complete waste of time. Why? Because he wouldn't learn anything. So his idea was to propose to the teacher 2 things. First, yeah, he was going to apologize to the teacher for swearing. That wasn't the right thing to do, and that was just impulsive. He did it in the moment. And secondly, he was going to organize a time in his own time to sand down the desk and repaint the peeling desk as a way of making amends. A relevant, meaningful consequence. Actually, I wanted to jump for joy, because faced with a punishment, this boy was able to stick his hand up, to admit his mistake, to apologize, and then look for a more meaningful, relevant way to put things right. And you know what? His suggestion would be far more productive than sitting in a room for a detention for an hour and a half after school. I confess I was proud, because if he could cope this well when things go wrong at the tender age of 12, I thought he's going to be unstoppable when he grows up.
I love that. I love that. The bit around punishment and behavior, I just thought was so relevant. There's such a debate going on. If you go on Twitter and talk about education as behavior as an unmet need, there are so many people who will agree with you and so many people who will vehemently disagree with you. That's just about naughty children. But what you create in your book is like opening up their brains. And in retrospect, in hindsight, for your son to look back on his behavior, but to actually see what's going on. And yes, I did this, and yes, I did that. But it wasn't just because I'm a naughty person. There was other things that were going on, and desperately trying to be reasonable with their brain that's differently wired, as you refer to it.
So you've just triggered me with that word naughty.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
because Sam was labelled naughty, stupid, and silly.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as naughty. There's such a thing as a child who behaves inappropriately, and there's always a reason for that behaviour.
You talk about him going from different and difficult to capable and confident, and I think that journey is so important, and helping teachers to know what's going on in that child's brain, so they aren't those 3 words that clearly are a trigger, which I think come from primary school with your son.
And I do have to say the teachers played a significant role in Sam changing his perception of what he could do. And I acknowledge all the teachers in the book, because really when he got to a fabulous school called Morehouse down in Farnham, which is a dyslexic school, he made, I would say, strong friendships with some of his teachers and still keeps in touch with them to this day. Strong, meaningful friendships based on mutual respect and an ability to look beyond the behavior you're seeing to see the potential. Oh my God, that is what makes teachers extraordinary. And I think the whole profession should be just rated completely differently in this country. I don't think we give teachers way enough credit for the work they're doing.
We never stood and clapped for the teachers, did we? No. Your words there so eloquently describe what great teaching is all about and how it can touch lives and change families' lives. So thank you for that. I could talk to you for a lot longer, but we have to end it. Where can people find out more about you? I think the Roving Bookshop, again, who are helping us with this festival, they can get your book through there. How can they get hold of you? Is there a website? Are you on social media?
The Roving Bookshop, and also my publisher Crown House currently has a 50% special offer deal, because tomorrow I'm talking at the Festival of Education. So they can certainly get the book that way. How can they find out about me? My business is theparentpractice.com. So I'm at www.theparentpractice.com. And if any teachers are listening, I also have a speaking website, which is very easy. It's elainehalligan.com. So really super easy to find me. You won't find me on Twitter much, I confess. I find it just a bit too noisy there. So I've got to pick my platforms. I'm kind of Instagram and LinkedIn at the moment when I have the time. So if you do contact me on Twitter, forgive me if I'm a bit slow in replying.
That's okay. You're accessible in all sorts of different ways. And I do recommend the book for teachers who are parents or teachers who aren't parents or have been parents, but in terms of the relevance for helping them be better at what they do. It's such a powerful book. It really is. So Elaine, that's been great to speak to you. I'm glad Sam is doing well beyond all this sort of stuff. Good luck with all his entrepreneurial endeavours.
It's exhausting living with them.
Yes, I bet.
It's actually exhausting.
Thanks very much, Elaine. Thank you. See you again. Bye.